Next up, we have the amazing Gregory D. Hicks. His acting credentials, both film and stage, are too numerous to list, but include Titus Andronicus in the Shakespeare play Titus Andronicus, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the play The Mountaintop. Today, he will be performing a famous speech by abolitionist Frederick Douglass entitled "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." Douglass delivered this speech on July 5th, 1852 in Corinthian Hall, Rochester, New York, while addressing the Rochester Ladies' Entries Anti-Slavery Society. Let's give Greg a big round of applause.
All right, everybody, how we doing out there?
Woo!
Come on, a little bit more energy. How we doing out there, all right? Yeah, there we go. There we go. All right, so I got this that I'll read, and I also have some merchandise, some Black Lives Matter merchandise. I have masks. I have this face covering you see, and I also have shirts. Everything is $10, but if you want to, bundle something up, we can work something out, okay? So hit me up after. Friends and fellow citizens, my business, if any here today, is to win the present. The accepted time with God and his cause is the ever-living now. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present. Heart within and God overhead. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. To all inspiring motives, to noble deeds which can be gained from the past, we are welcome. But now is the time, the important time. Your fathers lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labors of your fathers, unless your children are to be blessed by your labor. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence. Sidney Smith tells us that men seldom eulogize the wisdom and virtues of their fathers, but to excuse some folly or wickedness of their own. The truth is not a doubtful one. There are illustrations of it near and remote, ancient and modern. Need I remind you that a similar thing is being done all across this country today? Need I tell you that the Jews are not the only people who built the tombs of the prophets, garnished the scepters of their religion, of the righteous? Washington cannot die till he broke the chains of his slaves. Yet his monument is built up by the price of human blood, and the traitors in the bodies and souls of men shout, "We have Washington, our father!" Alas, should be so. Yet so it is. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with the national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? Am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? But such is not the state of this case. I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included with the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessing in you which this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhumane mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? If so, there is a parallel to your conduct. And let me warn you that if it is dangerous to copy the example of a nation whose crimes, lowering up to heaven, were thrown down by the breath of the Almighty, burying that nation in irrevocable ruin, I can today take up the plaintive lament of a peeled and woe-smitten people. Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view. Standing there, identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to be the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to a false future. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice or who is not at heart a slaveholder shall not confess to right and just. But I fancy I hear someone of my audience say, it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists failed to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce me less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all the plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slaverist creed would we have to argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light? Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? That point is conceded already. Nobody doubts it. The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. They acknowledge when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia, which, if committed by a black man, no matter how ignorant he may be, subject him to punishment of death. while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. But what this is but acknowledgement that the slave is a normal, moral, intellectual, and responsible being. The manhood of the slave is conceded. It is admitted in the fact that Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teachings of the slave to read and to write. When you can point to any such laws in reference to the beasts of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of a slave. When the dogs in the streets, when the fowls in the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish in the sea and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man. For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. Is it not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing buildings, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are encouraged in all manners of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planting, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called to prove that we are men. Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty, that he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is that a question for Republicans? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans, dividing and subdividing a discourse to show that men have a natural right to freedom? Speaking of it relatively, and positively, negatively, and affirmatively. To do so would to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him. What, am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their master? Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employments of my time and strength than such arguments would imply. What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine, that God did not establish it, that our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in the thought. That which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? That can, may. They that can, may. I cannot. The time for such arguments is past. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability, and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery steam of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, weathering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, the earthquake, the feeling of the nation that must be quickened, the conscience of a nation that must be roused, the propriety of a nation that must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty, an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denouncing of tyrants, bass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloodily than are the people of these United States at this hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchies of the old world, travel through South America, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts on the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival. Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in the boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, wine, swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and reciprocity of the buyers and sellers of men. My soul sickens at the sight. Is this the land your fathers loved? The freedom which they toiled to win? Is this the earth whereon they move? Are these the graves they slumber in? Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on the national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country bans your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundations of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword to a mocking earth. It is the antagonistic force in your government, the only thing that seriously disturbs and endangers your union. It fetters your progress. It is the enemy of improvement, the deadly foe of education. It fosters pride. It breeds insolence. It promotes vice. It shelters crime. It is the cause to the earth that supports it, and yet you cling to it as if it were the sheet anchor of all your hopes. Oh, be warned. Be warned. A horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away. Fling from the hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 millions crush and destroy it forever. But it is answered in the reply to all this, that precisely what I have denounced is, in fact, guaranteed and sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States. That the right to hold and to hunt a slave is part of the Constitution framed by the illustrious fathers of this republic. Then I dare to affirm, notwithstanding all I have said before, your fathers stopped, basely stopped, to palter with us in a double sense and keep the word of promise to the ear, but break it to the heart. Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the Union, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. The arm of the Lord is not short, and the doom of slavery is certain. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope. While drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is also cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did years ago. No nation can shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot around the same old path of its fathers without interference. The time was when such could have been done. Long established customs of hurtful character could formally fence themselves in and do their evil work with social impunity. Knowledge was then confined and enjoyed by the privileged few, and the multitude walked on in mental darkness. But a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has bore away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the dark corners of the globe. It makes its pathway over and under the sea, as well as on the earth. Wind, steam, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinguishedly heard on the other. The far off and almost fabulous Pacific rose in grandeur at our feet. The celestial empire, the mystery of ages is being solved. The fate of the Almighty, let there be light, has not yet spent its force. No abuse, no outrage, whether in taste, sport, or avarice, now can hide itself in the all-prevailing light. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying, Godspeed the year of Jubilee, the wide world over, when from their galling chains are set free, the oppressed shall vilely bend the knee, and wear the yoke of tyranny like brutes no more. That year will come in freedom's reign, to man his plunder fights again, restore. Godspeed the day when human blood shall cease to flow, and every clime be understood the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend each foe. God spend the hour, the glorious hour, when none on earth shall exercise a lordly power, nor in tyrant's presence cower, but all the manhood stature tower by equal birth. That hour will come to each to all, and from his prison house the thrall. Until that year, day, hour arrive, with head and heart and hand I'll strive to break the rod, to rend the gyve, the spoiler of his prey deprived. So witness heaven, and never from my chosen post, whatever the peril or the cost, be driven. Thank you.